Joespeak Podcast. Listen, I always say I have a good one. I really do have a good one, but let me make a quick admission quickly. We started late because we've been on Clubhouse. 3 days in, follow your people at Joespeak, Joespak. But in any event, I always have a good one, and I always say I have a good one, and I really do this time. This is the interview that tried to get away. And we finally met today at the first time, which is nuts. So I've got Pastor Sam Casey of New Life Christian Church, as well as congregations organized for prophetic engagement, any and everything that's involved with community advancement for people of color, particularly Black folks in the Inland Empire. Sam Casey is involved in it. So honored to have him here. Pastor Sam, hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going, Esquire Joe? Man, it's good to be here, man.
It's
and
good.
Look, I didn't try to run, man. It's sitting down with you, man. That's not easy, man. I don't know what you're gonna ask me or something. Maybe my wife slipped you some special notes or something that I have to answer.
Not at all, man. Not at all. But it's always good to get together. You're kind of hard to catch up with, but hey, that's because you're out doing the work. And so let's get into it. Why don't you give us, for those of us that don't know, a little quick background. We'll always build the house a little bit and talk about the things that you've done and kind of how you kind of got to this point where you are.
Wow. Listen, man, Sam Casey started this work, man, over 20 plus years ago now. Been in the preaching ministry almost 30, but come to what's commonly known as community organizing probably about 22, 23 years ago now, man, as a liaison for the church I grew up in Watts, California, Mount Olive Second Missionary Baptist Church.
Wow.
Shout out to my pastor, E. Winford Bell, father in the ministry.
Sure.
And started there, man. And my mentor, who later became my mentor, Reverend Eugene Williams II, was doing some organizing of Black churches in the L.A. area, formerly from Philadelphia. Just an awesome dude, man. And I became a liaison for our congregation. And at that time, the organization that I originally started working for called Los Angeles Metropolitan Churches. And from there, he did what is known in the organizing world as a one-on-one with me. 12 months later, man, he offered me a job. I think that was 1998. He did the one-on-one on me. August 1st, 1999, I walked away from Boys Republic, where I had been there, and was a group facilitator, caseworker for almost 6 years, and walked away August 1st, 1999, and started community organizing here in San Bernardino and Riverside County. So it's been, I remember it like yesterday, man. It was right around the time Taisha Miller, a lot of things were going on with Taisha Miller, the young lady who was 25 years old, almost like Breonna Taylor's situation, shot and murdered by Riverside PD. That's how I came to this organizing work, man.
How about that? And so you took that position to move east, or were you already in Inland Empire?
The thing is, man, my mom and family, we're part of that late 90s. No, not late 90s, early 90s migration, man.
Absolutely.
Grew up in Gardena, California, was originally born in St. Louis, Missouri, moved here, started third grade. 89, I think it was, summer of 89, my mom got this big idea to move to Ontario, California. Ontario, California,
like,
man. Like,
what's in Ontario? Isn't that in
we
Canada?
can't find in Gardena, And so over the summer, man, we moved to Ontario, Vineyard and G Street, right by In and Out, man. That was the only good thing about moving out here. We was right by In and Out, And so I finished high school, though, at Gardena High School. Would go down with my mom early in the morning, catch the bus on 1st and Spring to Gardena High School my entire senior year. And to a family allowed me to move in with them like the last 6 months of high school. Then when I graduated, I came on back out, man.
Wow. How about that? That's heavy. So tell me about how you made your way to New Life Christian, to what became New Life Christian, you founding that.
Man, we don't have a whole lot of time for that, man. So let me just give you the edited version. Man, like I said, I've been in ministry almost 30 years, man. And around 2002, 2003, while serving at another church, I transitioned from Mount Olive to a church in Pomona at that time it was called Imani Imani Christian Temple, Afrocentric, strong Afrocentric ministry, man. At that time, his name was Pastor Jelani Kafela, now Bishop Jelani Kafela. Imani Christian Cathedral is the name of the church. Around 2000, 99, 2000, at the same time, this transition, moving into the organizing work, felt this rumbling in my spirit that there was more to the church than annual days. I grew up in a traditional Baptist church. For sure. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I knew there was something more because of what I was experiencing through this organizing as well, and just a greater call to worship and justice. Met Bishop Kafela, Imani Christian Cathedral was what I saw and read in a book called God Chasers. You know, when everybody was on this thing of, chasing the presence of God. Truly experienced it, man, at Imani. Spent some time there, ultimately became the assistant pastor there around 2002. Started feeling the pull of God on me. But didn't know what it was at that time. And I knew New Life, but didn't know, all of the things. Around 2000, that was 2002, 2003. Around 2013, 13, it wouldn't leave me. Went to my wife, opened up 1 Peter chapter 3, her and my three children, and read, if you desire the office of a bishop, these are the things. And I read it to them with tears in my eyes, because this was the determining factor if I was going to start New Life or not. Is this me? I said to my family, and they're laughing. They'd be like, "Dad, what are you talking about? You're just our dad." No, let me read this description. I'm trying to be real deep. And with their affirmation, because it didn't matter what the world said. I knew what God was saying to me, if my wife and children didn't see this in me, then I didn't believe the call of God was for us to start New Life. Pulled a group together on October 2nd, 2013. I basically just shared with them, like, look, I don't know what the Lord is saying, just need you to pray with us. And they looking at me like, you crazy. This is the start of a church. I don't know about no church plant. And so from there, man, October 2nd, 2013 was our first prayer gathering. Had open house Bible study December 17th, 2014. First service was February the 2nd, 2014. So those open house Bible studies, was in 2013 of December. And then our first launch service, Super Bowl Sunday. I never forget it. Everybody was telling us, don't do Super Bowl Sunday. That's the worst day to launch. We had standing room only, man, of well-wishers and people who have come and looky-loos. But it was a glorious day, man. October, I never forget it. February 2nd, 2014 was the birthing, literally, of the manifestation of what God had given us as a vision.
So tell me about the intersection between your church and Cope. How does Cope start, and how do they intersect?
So Cope, man, started back in 2000, man. Although I was organizing, I started cutting my teeth in organizing in Los Angeles at Los Angeles Metropolitan Churches. At that time, who's Reverend Eugene Williams, the late Reverend Eugene Williams II, who's no longer living, passed in 2012, expressed an interest in launching an affiliate organization, sister organization in the area, because some other pastors had expressed an interest. Let me say this, and at that time too, Esquire Joe, we had the largest network of African-American churches in the state of California doing proactive, prophetic organizing from Oakland to Los Angeles to San Diego, and then Cope came on board in 2000 to start the work here in San Bernardino and Riverside. And so the intersection of New Life and Cope is very seamless for me. It's been a difficult transition for my church, because some believe, like, Pastor, I don't consider myself, I do consider myself a multicultural pastor. I don't consider myself a multi-ethnic pastor. And most will say multicultural pastor. No, every pastor to me is a multicultural pastor, because even if you're pastoring an all-black church, nobody's culture is in that church is the same. Especially if you're from the South, you're from the North, you're from the Midwest. There are different cultures in that. I have, like, if you look at my band, man, like my musicians, all of my musicians, except for one, are non-black.
Right. How about that?
The keyboardist is Latino. Our drummer is Asian.
Right.
Our bass player, Minnie, is Latino.
Right. Yeah.
And from time to time, we have, different people come in. So when we talk about the intersection of our work, it was difficult sometimes. And I'll be honest with some of the people within our congregation.
Sure.
Pastor, how are you talking about, why are you just, matter of fact, one of my people came to me and said, Pastor, when you talk about black men, can you just say men? when you talk about the issues that black men go through, and I'm like, if Caucasian men were experiencing some of the same things, and this was during the time when a lot of the violence and shootings were taking place. This was way even before George Floyd.
Of course.
This was, I believe, Tamir Rice or Mike Brown, Michael Brown, the one in Ferguson, Missouri.
Gotcha.
And I took some position and said some things across the pulpit. Yeah. And interestingly enough, man, not until recently, not until 2020, is now where my congregation is seeing the intersection now. They didn't see it before. As a matter of fact, even some who are non-black struggled with it. I bet. And even those who are black in my congregation struggled. Because, Pastor, why are you saying these things? Why are you showing up and doing these things? And now I think they begin to see the value of it. Like, to be honest, people don't even think I have a job. Like, they don't think organizers do anything but just show up at meetings. Now, as an executive director of the organization, I still consider myself an organizer. It was difficult for them to really see what the work was or what the work is until they began to see the manifestations of it. That's right. Probably in 2020. So so the New Life just celebrated 7 years this past February in 2021. But I can honestly say that most in my church, I've talked about it. I've preached it. Probably not as consistently as much as I could have and should. But now moving forward, it's part of the fabric of who we are. I can honestly say up until last year, no one really had a real appreciation for the work. Sure.
I think this is what I want to talk on in a minute, and then we're going to go to kind of the things we're seeing with COVID and all of the things that you guys are doing to try to put that together. You remind me of many African-American pastors and spiritual leaders that are on the front lines doing the work, where the whole world is not necessarily looking. And so even with your own church, you have a lot of folks that are starting to get the memo now, but the fact of the matter is, in terms of what you do every day and in terms of what you're talking about from the pulpit, you're already there.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so talk about just the fact that, what people see when they look through the window. Everybody's kind of talking about it now, but you've been here sounding this alarm, and you've been doing it spiritually. You've been spiritually speaking truth to power, as opposed to taking a quote political stance. And I just think that so many people get that twisted and mixed up.
Indeed.
Actually, guys, this is not about Donald Trump. It's not about Joe Biden. It's about what's right and what's wrong.
Yes.
And you guys have been there the whole time.
Yeah, and listen, man, in the words of a hip hop historian, LL Cool J, don't call it a comeback. We've been here for years. You know what I mean? And for me, man, I believe it's the president of Fuller Theological Seminary, Mark Laberton has written a book called The Dangerous Acts of Worship. And he talks about you're not truly worshiping if your worship does not move you into acts of justice. Bring it. That we can't listen, man. I don't care. I don't even want to. Back in the day when I was a young preacher, I used to want to be one of the bad preachers. Like one of the preachers I look up to is H.B. Charles Jr. Man, if you've never listened, those of you listen to the podcast, go check out H.B. Charles Jr. One of the coldest pulpiteers, breaks down the text and just leaves you speechless sometimes.
For sure.
Jamal Harrison Bryant, you sort of, when you coming up, you sort of pattern yourself. But now I realize that God has really uniquely gifted and graced me with a lane. And the church now, man, more than ever, specifically, hear me when I say this, the black church.
Yes, sir.
Because now we have fallen into this multicultural idea when the reality is, the church has always been multicultural. The challenge is it has struggled to be multi-ethnic. And I say that in reference to, if you are a church of the Lord Jesus Christ, believing in the sacred texts of the Old and the New, concealed and revealed, you must be a preacher and a practicer and a practitioner, not only just theologically, but practically of justice.
That's right.
It is our call, according to the to the text.
Absolutely.
To call, first of all, the people of, am I yelling? Because, I get excited when I, do I need to calm down?
I think you're fine.
Listen, it is the call of every preacher, Black, Latino, Asian, whatever it is, to speak out and to call out injustice.
That's right. White ones too.
Including white ones. But here is the reality.
Yes, sir.
We as Blacks, those who have been kissed by the sun, I believe are in a unique position, man, to speak truth to power. Here's why. Yes, sir. We have been the benefactors and the burden bearers of injustice in this nation. Not that nobody else has suffered injustice, but here's the reality. When we talk about racism in this country, racism is really only about black and white. And even now growing in sentiment amongst others of color, anti-blackness. Because they're believing that we've had our day and had our time. So it's the role of the church, the Black church in particular, that has always been our lane. And part of what has happened, I think we have abjugated our responsibility. That unfortunately, that call is on our lives. My mentor, you heard me mention earlier, Reverend Eugene Williams II, wrote an article back in early 2000s, mid 2005, I believe it was, the rise of the rock star preacher. And many, now everybody has their favorite preacher, and the prosperity gospel and all of these different messages that are on the rise. Because Blacks, we started doing well, and I said we because I wept one day, Esquire Joe, watching a documentary about Dr. King and his life, and I realized that I'm a middle class Black man while living in a middle class Black, and not a Black community, but a middle class community, fighting for justice. At the end of the day, I'm organizing against myself sometimes.
Keep it real.
You know what I mean? Because
yes, sir.
How close are you really to the issues and the concerns that people are going through?
Sure.
That's why we as churches, including New Life, has to do a better job of promoting the message of love. Yes, sir. That's in tension with justice. That we must do what Walter Brueggemann talks about in his book called The Prophetic Imagination. We must have a counter consciousness that calls to account the ills and the challenges that we see that we literally have been graced by God to call attention to, and not only call attention to it, but actually do something about it. So it's seamless for me, man, even more so now.
It's just amazing. Talk about the COVID pivot, what COVID did for all of us, right? The idea, this is something that I think a lot of people missed, and a lot of people of faith may have missed. I saw a connection between the fact that COVID happened and we were all sitting still when George Floyd happened.
My God. Man.
I saw a connection. And I gotta say, one of my biggest frustrations was when people that purport and profess to be people of faith continue to have talk lines about their favorite sins, their favorite issues. And I'm like, well, listen, you mean to tell me with what's going on right now, all you can say and all you have from the throne room is what a disconnected politician is saying? That's all you, that's it. And my biggest concern has been for non-Christians and baby Christians.
Absolutely.
That are looking at that and saying, so, you see, I've had people come up to me and say, Joe, you see why I'm atheist? Because
at the end of the day, man, we don't have an analysis. Even as it relates to not only even our current administration, but our previous administration. I love what Dr. Maya Angelou said, our Queen Mother. She says, once somebody shows you who they are, believe them. So why once our administration showed us who he was, and even our current administration, why are we so surprised? Here is where we missed out, I believe, as a community of faith, specifically Christians. We missed an opportunity to be a salient, clarion voice for the community and for the people. Right. Shameless plug, man. I'm in a sermon series right now at my church entitled From Pandemic to Perfection. And even before the pandemic hit, before George Floyd, before Ahmaud Arbery, and before Breonna Taylor, we got to keep their names alive. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Even before any of that, January, the Lord speaks to my spirit, reimagine. Yeah. I'm in a funky place in ministry. The church is in sort of this kind of stale place. Right. And the Lord says, reimagine. But I did not understand. I'm thinking reimagine the praise team, reimagine how we doing men's ministry, which all those things are good. Right. But we also must reimagine how we see and view the church and what's the role of the church. Oh, yeah. So we as a church in particular were forced to reimagine. And might I add, the church in general, universal, was forced to reimagine. We had to move to virtual. Right. But in the midst of this, a powder keg was brewing. Right. We watched for 8 minutes and 46 seconds a man be brutally, modern day lynching, if we want to call it that. Right, life just extinguished, calling for his mother. I still can't watch the video anymore now. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But the church should have risen to the occasion and begin to not only, and listen, let me be honest. There were voices, there were churches. Right. So let's be fair. Right. There were churches and voices, but we did not come together. And this is where I believe the evangelical church in particular. Yes, sir. And look how we're even classifying the black church, the evangelical church. Right. When Christ said, I came to die for the church. We're the ones with all the separation. With all the separation. Right. Yeah. But the reality is, man, we missed an opportunity really to unify the body of Christ and fulfill what Christ said in John chapter 17, verse 20 and 21. Father, make them one, even as you and I are one. Then they may know that you have sent me. Right. And we missed it, man. Right. And I must admit, I repent for and have repented for the arrows that I threw just out of anger and frustration to our white counterparts. I mean, I literally got on Facebook and in news reports. Oh man. And I called out the chief of police. I called out white pastors. And here it is. Right, yeah. I'm getting ready to get in trouble on your podcast. I pray you don't lose viewers. I even called out black folks. Right. Who attended these evangelical churches. You know what I mean? Yes, sir. And might I add, since we're going to talk about COVID, where are they coming now, Joe, to get their vaccinations? Right. I had a friend in LA. Their churches are not fighting for, advocating for the most vulnerable population in their churches to have vaccination clinics at their sites. Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's nuts. So now with us dealing with COVID, I've seen you a lot in the news lately, dealing with a couple issues. First of all, access. Yes. Second of all, trust. You know, with our community. You know what I mean? And equity. Right. Yeah. And equity. And so talk about some of the efforts and some of the partnerships that you're forming to say, hey, this thing is happening. Yeah. Let's make sure we're at the front of it. Let's make sure it's being provided and getting to us. Yes, sir. And then let's make sure we're taking advantage of the fact that it's made available. Indeed. Listen, not only am I the executive director of Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement, or COPE. You'll hear me say COPE from here on out, but I'm also the first vice president of the Inland Empire Concerned African American Churches. Right. And you'll hear me say ICAC from here on out, because gotcha. You know, I don't have that many words left in the day. So the president, Bishop Kelvin Simmons of ICAC, and the leadership of ICAC and COPE came together. Right. We've been working together for years anyway, and approached along with the Rethink Public Safety Coalition. Remember last June, we forced the county of San Bernardino to declare racism. Yes, sir. Yes, that's right. To declare racism as a public health crisis. Right. The very first county in the state of California to do it. Right. Yeah, in the midst of that, we were already doing COVID testing in our congregations because of that declaration and partnership. That's right. So then part of that evolution, Bishop Kelvin Simmons challenged the county, he wasn't even really comfortable, nor was I. Let me be honest. Neither one of us were comfortable when the vaccination conversation came into play.
Right, sure.
Just the history of vaccinations. And I've never had a flu shot.
Right.
So just you're not feeling comfortable with it.
Really, yeah.
But when the vaccinations came on, the conversations began to grow and they were becoming available in the community. The county approached us and said, hey, since you're already doing testing in your congregations, you can also do vaccinations.
Right, sure.
But the county was a little slower. Our first partnership was with Loma Linda University.
Right. How about that?
And man, it was a powerful partnership.
Yes, sir.
Loma Linda University, man, opened up the floodgate to us. Yeah. And before we wanted to do any vaccinations, we know we had to do education first.
That's right.
We can't treat these vaccination sites like the Field of Dreams. We think just because we pop them up, folks are going to come and get them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so we partnered with Loma Linda University and just hosted one last week. Yeah. Faith summits around the vaccination. Young, phenomenal doctor at Loma Linda University. Shout out to Dr. Jam. Her name is Dr. Jacinda Abdul Mutakabir. We call her Dr. Jam. Dr. Bridget Petit. Who's a black psychologist there. Right. We did these faith summits to talk about several things. One, a culture of fear, and moving from fear to understanding the facts around the vaccination and mixing the science with our faith. Right. And then Dr. Jam talked about, as a pharmacist, talked about each one of the vaccinations, the pros and cons, really no pros, but really helped us understand. Right. Even more recently, this last one, she talked about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and helped us understand that even though the efficacy rate is at 72%, that vaccination is even more effective than Moderna, the one I've already taken, and the Pfizer. And here's why. Right. It covers all of the mutations, out of South Africa and and out of Europe as well. Right. Wow. So we built this partnership with Loma Linda. Then it springboarded into this partnership with San Bernardino County Department of Public Health. Right. We're hosting pop-up mobile clinics this entire month to see how it goes, to expand it for the next, prayerfully until the end of the year, or at least until the fall. Yeah. And now we just inked the deal with Riverside County Department of Public Health to do the same thing here in the county of Riverside.
Wow. So tell me what people that want to, and this is a larger question, not only about COVID and the underlying issues that it presents, the equity issues and things like that. Somebody's looking through the window and says, how do we help? First, how do we become more aware of what the Copes of the world are doing? And you guys are at the front of it. And one of the things that I've become more aware because of the work that I'm doing now, doing the racial and economic justice practice.
Yes, sir.
I kept asking people, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to connect the dots with? And your name kept coming up. Wow. And every time I have had a discussion about a potential class action related to an equity issue, it's you that's actually connecting me and connecting the dots to the gatekeepers that have been dealing with those issues for years. And I appreciate that.
Man, that's humbling, dude. Yeah.
And so what can someone that doesn't feel like they've done enough, or doesn't feel like they've done anything, or wants to get in the know, what can someone in that category do to become that active person, religion aside?
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But what can that person do? Because there are plenty of people. I think one of the things that's good about right now is that a whole lot of people are paying attention.
Yes.
And a whole lot of people want to be involved and want to be involved in solutions. And I think a part of it is just some understanding what's possible.
Indeed. And listen, man, although COPE is a Christ or Christian-based 501c3, faith-based, faith-rooted in Christianity, listen, it took me some time to get here, but I'm there now, that our God in Christ is so huge. Right. He's not offended that those whom he's died for are working together now, regardless of, you know what I mean? We can
they get down, right?
Absolutely. I love what Gandhi said. He said, I almost became Christian until I almost became a follower of Christ until I met Christians. Right. You know what I mean?
I can relate to that.
You know what I'm saying? So
I do.
For those who would like to get engaged in the work of COPE or work like ours, you don't have to be of no particular faith.
Right. Yeah.
Here is what we ask. Right. Date us for a little while. Walk with us for a little while.
Sure.
And if our faith just so happens to rub off on you, you know what I mean? You stay in the kitchen long enough, you're going to get burnt by the stove. Because sometimes they need to see Christ in action. Yeah, you know what I mean?
That's right.
And this is the opportunity. But aside from that, for those who want to get engaged and involved, man, look us up. Copesite.org. Right. We meet on a monthly basis, and we're not only focused on, we focus in a number of areas. If yours is criminal justice reform, we're working in the area of criminal justice reform, education reform, access to health care. We want to ensure there's equity in funding in education for blacks and students of color. We're working in civic engagement, the civic engagement space. So we do phone banking and community canvassing around particular initiatives. And so, look, man, there's room for everyone. There's room for everyone at the cross, and there's room for everybody in the work of social justice.
So, in closing, thank you so much for doing this. But let us know, and man, we this is 30 minutes of heat, man. We brought it to them, brother. But give us something that we can chew on as to why we ought to be hopeful.
Man, listen, this is why we ought to be hopeful, man, and why I'm most hopeful. I believe, man, that this has given us an opportunity not only to be hopeful, but really to act on that hope.
Yes, sir.
And here's why. This is not the first time we've been here.
Right.
Now. Our parents have been, it's the first time we've been here, but we've been here before. What we need to do is learn the lessons from past and previous seasons that we don't repeat some of the same mistakes, some of the same missteps, and use our faith to fuel us forward with greater focus than we've ever had before. And so, look, man, I'm most hopeful, man, now because we have an opportunity for communities to come together, regardless of what you believe, how you feel. But you cannot deny that there's a great move and a call for justice right now. And if you're open to that, look, come partner with us. If you're open to that, allow the Lord to stir you and agitate you into justice. That's why I'm hopeful, Joe.
Excellent. Hey, well, listen, if Denzel Washington was here saying, my man, how we looking? I would say we're looking pretty good. Sam Casey, New Life Christian, Congregations Organized for Prophetic Engagement.
Yes, sir.
My man, I appreciate working with you.
Bless you, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Joespeak Podcast. Bam!